All right, welcome back to the podcast. We're back on a roll with these things. I said on last week's episode, whenever we had Denton Cable on, that we went crazy with the Hot Rod Ultra. That's like our biggest ministry event of the year. So we put all this energy into it, and this year we changed it up and we did live streams on our YouTube channel at the Hot Rod Ultra. Basically giving updates throughout the race. We had a camera set up on myself and Kevin, but then also on the runners, so people who are watching the live stream could see everything that was happening. So we've really kind of upgraded the things that we're doing from a technical standpoint compared to what we were doing a year ago. But that was a huge effort, and it felt good to get somebody back on the podcast last week with Denton. He was amazing. And we're keeping that momentum rolling today because we have another great guest who has a lot of experience, a lot of practical experience, and hopefully a lot of insight to provide today. Not to put pressure on her or anything, but yeah, today we have Miss Julie Denton on the podcast. Julie, thanks for coming on.
Two Dentons in a row.
I know that's what we were talking offline before we started recording. That I've been thinking about, like, hopefully I don't stumble over my words as we start recording today, but off to a good start. So yeah, before we dive in, Julie, I think it's obviously appropriate. Just tell us, who is Julie Denton? Give us a little introduction of yourself.
Yes, so I am a wife and mother first. My husband Ryan, little boy Grady, who's 7. We have a very active lifestyle and just busy all the time. But another big part of my life is work, and so Blue Cotton has been a part of my life for the last 13 years, and I've had a long story there and a lot of learning experiences. But I'm a Kentucky girl, grew up in Paducah, outside of Paducah in Ballard County. I don't even go past Paducah for most people because they don't know. But where the Mississippi and Ohio River meet, that's where Ballard County is. And grew up there till 16 years old, and then moved to this area. So I've made Bowling Green home over the last 30 years now.
Yeah, well, that's it's funny. Kevin and I were running this morning with a mutual friend of ours, and this guy has just moved here about a year ago, and he asked, "What is like the ancestry in Bowling Green?" And Kevin had made the comment, "I feel like everybody who's here have been people that have just like been here." So I'm like, "Well, I moved here in 2014,
we're
and
settlers.
Yeah, so
we're
settlers. Yeah, I'm like, I feel like you're born here or you're a settler, so you come here and then you just never leave.
Right.
So I'm there with you on that. But yeah, you mentioned briefly your involvement with Blue Cotton. Mm-hmm. It's been a long journey, and we'll definitely dive into that. But before we do that, I want to make it a point and say how big of a help Blue Cotton was this year for the Hot Rod Ultra. Speaking of that event, every year we try to make this event bigger and bigger. And when I came on last year, that was my first year helping and having hands on the event on the Hot Rod Ultra. And I knew that we need to elevate the racer experience, and we need to make this event big for Bowling Green, but want to make people come to Bowling Green to be a part of it. So we're just thinking of different ways to do this. We upgraded our medals. We got more like swag for the runners and things like that. And one of the things we did differently this year was we had an artist create a custom piece of artwork to put on the official race day shirt. So Julie, you saw it, but and I've shown it. Yeah, I've shown it on here before. I held it up on if you watch the YouTube live streams, but it was basically a hand sketched map of Bowling Green, and then we implemented all of our sponsors and big businesses that are associated with the event. So if you look at it on the shirt, it was like a map of like different roads in Bowling Green, and then whatever businesses were involved, it kind of had them in their respective locations. And then obviously it said Hot Rod Ultra on the front of the shirt. So with this event going, all of the proceeds after we pay expenses go to Curbside Ministries. We are always looking for in-kind donations and monetary, but what are ways that people can help us make the most money for this event to benefit Curbside? And so we had reached out to Blue Cotton and say, hey, do you all want to be involved? Actually, I think the conversation may have been initiated by Blue Cotton to Terry Sheldon, who founded Curbside, basically said, hey, we want to be involved. And so we're like, all right, well, if you want to be involved, we have this awesome shirt we really want designed, and we would love if you can help us as much as you can from an in-kind donation standpoint. And to say that Blue Cotton delivered is an understatement. They were, you saw the shirts. They were awesome.
Well, and yes, and I have big opinions about event shirts, because I think there's like a way to do it where because you want people to wear it not just that day, you want them to wear it as much as possible. There's a big meaning behind it, and so many times event shirts just aren't designed for people to wear it much past the event. your design was beautiful. I've actually used as an example for several people of like, this is how you do an event
Awesome. That is so
design.
cool.
And really, when you think about marketing dollars or like impressions, you want to see how many impressions can you get from that shirt, kind of brings your cost per wear down too. So obviously, those were an in-kind donation, but
Yeah.
still, you want to get the word out. And it was awesome design. I told them they should do it for a print or something and sell those.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
it
we
was a
had the
great.
idea of like selling the shirts too. And I think next year that's a no-brainer. This was kind of like a last minute, idea, when it kind of came down to we needed to order the shirts within the next month. Kevin had went to a wedding and someone had like a sketch of the town they were in, sort of similar to what we did on the shirts. And we were like, oh my gosh, we need to do that for the ultra shirts. And obviously it was a lot of color. It was a lot of work. And we acknowledge that. And yeah, they you all did an awesome job. And I'm glad that you all thought they were cool too, because you guys see millions of shirt or designs a year or
Yes,
potential designs a year.
we
So
do.
but yeah, it was cool. You got to come out
Every
to the Hot
design
Rod
is
Ultra.
special, but some stand out more than others.
Yeah, and
So
that's
yeah.
exactly what we wanted to do. So I'm glad you said that, is like design a shirt that people just like the look of it. Like it doesn't
Hmm.
have to only be associated with the event.
Right.
We want people to look at it and say, "Oh, it's the Hot Rod Ultra shirt," but that's also a really cool design.
Yes, for
So
sure.
you came out to the Ultra
I
that day,
did.
like for a little bit. So what did you think about the environment
Well,
while we're on the topic?
I didn't know what to expect, and then when I got the feel for what was happening, I just felt really a desire to cheer these people on
Hmm.
because, like, man, this is going to be a long day, but they signed up for it. So it was just really cool. I knew a few people participating, so it was really awesome.
Yeah, well, good. We're glad you came out, and again, so appreciative of Blue Cotton and everybody who was involved in that process. It was a huge hit. The shirts were a hit, and we've seen a lot of runners already, like wearing them out on their
Good.
runs and getting this cool weather in. We went long sleeve this year, which is new, and I'm glad we did. The day of
Yeah.
the race, it was like warm. We were like, oh no, did
Yeah,
we make a mistake going long sleeve? But I think it's paid off.
for sure.
So let's go ahead and dive in. So you mentioned Blue Cotton. So I want to start there, talk about your current role, and then after that, we're going to rewind. So kind of take us through operation wise, day to day. What's it look like for you at Blue Cotton?
For me or just Blue Cotton in
For
general?
you, yeah,
Oh,
for you
okay.
specifically.
So, well, just in case people don't know, Blue Cotton, we do custom screen printing and embroidery. So, group orders, anywhere where people are getting together and wearing the same thing, that's where our product lives. So, for me, currently as a partner, I do a lot of forward facing things, but we are going through a rebrand, a site redo. We are building some of our own custom technology to smooth out the process internally and reduce the friction for our people. So, kind of my projects right now reduce friction for customers and reduce friction for our team. And they're very long tail projects, but we're hoping to wrap that up at the beginning of next year. So hopefully I have some big news for you coming up, pieces of it, overseeing a lot of stuff. So my husband and I kind of laugh like when I come home, it's like, how was your day? I'm like, well, I don't know. Do you mean to list off all the meetings I was in? Because I'm just bouncing from one thing to the next, and it takes a lot of like mental capacity to work through them. But honestly, that's what I really enjoy, is just hopping around to projects, and it's just the challenge of figuring it all out and how do we
Mhm.
make this work for everyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm the same way. Like I would love starting projects and like the idea behind it. And sometimes that can be a fault for me because I get so excited about something new. Once I start getting into it, I'm like, okay, what else can we be doing?
Well, I
Um,
have something to say about that. I don't know if you saw this or not, but last year I became a Working Genius facilitator. And so this
mm,
is work from Patrick Lencioni. And if you don't know him, you should absolutely look into him. The table group, they're wonderful. But the Working Genius is just kind of like our given talents that each one of us have. And we both have two, and then but there's six total, so you have all six, but two of them are your geniuses, and then
mm,
two are competencies, two are frustrations. So by learning my own geniuses and my own frustrations, then I know everyone else's now. I see everyone through the lens of Working Genius. I can kind of know like, okay, this meeting's going to be difficult for me because these are part of my frustrations, but I've got to power through it. Or what do I need to build around myself to make this a good day? Or also know like this is my genius and this is probably going to frustrate that person
mm.
because that's not what they want to do. So you should definitely look into that.
Okay.
But we have incorporated that into kind of the language of Blue Cotton too. We've surveyed most of our people and just understanding where their strengths and weaknesses are as far as just like God-given talents,
Hmm.
and try to build their work around it too. So it's been really cool to see how we can just maximize everyone's experience at work when we put them in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one a great program to implement. I mean, when you work with people a lot, I think culture is just so important now, and a culture fit is obviously somebody that you want, but you
Mhm.
also understand that because they're a culture fit, you have to have them in the right position as well. And so understanding what their geniuses are, their frustrations are, I'm sure that is
It's
massive.
game changer. And I do have one story. I know this is going kind of in a different
No, that's good.
direction,
We want
but
this.
we have and I hope we won't name names, but they'll know who they are if they watch. But we had a employee who's been with us for a very long time, a printer, a great printer, one of our top ones. Um, but just would get really frustrated at times, maybe behave in a way that we would not like on in a professional level. And so it kind of got to the point where we're like, listen, if you keep acting like this, we're gonna have to part ways. Well, he came to us and said, "You know what? At the beginning of this year, in the summer, I'm gonna look for another job. I'm gonna go to this other place." And we're like, "Okay." And at least we have some notice. Sometimes people just walk out.
Mhm.
Um, but then after we got into it, we read a book with one of our groups that we have. We can talk about that later. And he's like, "You know what? I'm not going to leave here. This is a great place. It's been great. You've been a great boss." Talking to our production manager. And our production manager remembered that his working geniuses, this employee's, was a little bit different than the rest of ours. He's like, let me look into that. And he looked into it. This employee has the genius of wonder and invention, which is kind of high, like a 30,000 foot
Mm,
scale versus like ground level. And we were doing some big projects in production as far as lean manufacturing and continuous improvement. And it was kind of struggle for our production manager because that just wasn't his genius. And he's like, I have these projects that I could really use some help on. Like, would you want to help me with these? And he's like, I would love to help you with them. And so fast forward 6 months, this guy is so bought in to Blue Cotton. He absolutely loves his job, loves coming to work. He has brought about like amazing just discoveries in our production that's made huge efficiencies. His work life is better. I have no doubt. I've not asked him this, but I have no doubt his home life is better
mm,
because when he's not dreading going to work every single day, he's a better father, a better husband. And he's just a great champion for us on the floor. We had a big goal and they hit it the other day, and he was the one of most excited people. Where in the past, I would say he'd be like, whatever.
yeah.
So all that meant was he didn't get to not be a screen printer anymore. That's still his job, but
Mhm,
we get to pull him out and use his geniuses that we can't do because that's
mhm.
just what God gave him to do. And so it's just been the most awesome thing to see that not only have we salvaged a relationship, but we've really made a just great experience for everybody. So
Yeah. Wow, that is awesome. That is so cool. And I think on both parties, from the side for management, it takes a lot to be able to communicate that effectively to them, but then also both parties, yourself and the employee, to have to put your ego aside and be like, okay, let me hear the other person out
right.
because maybe there is something to this. And obviously that works when you leave your ego at the door. It just makes a huge difference, especially whenever it comes to work.
Hmm.
And like letting that get in the way could have totally changed the course of how things look for both you all and that employee
Right.
now.
And to be fair, if his geniuses had been something different, maybe we would have parted ways
Hmm.
because it just, you know, a, the job has to get done. And yeah, for as far as setting ego aside, it's hard to kind of weed through everything because you hear so much all day long, and it's like, what's a valid concern, and what are things that we can change here? How can we improve? So it takes a lot of just being intentional about those things to bring it to life.
Yeah. Well, Julie, this is going to be a great conversation. I can already tell we're just spurring right off of each other. So before we get too far into that, let's rewind. Like I said earlier, let's talk about where you started. So I know when we talked the other day, talking about today's conversation, you had told me, when I first started, like it doesn't look like now what I thought it was going to look like, and I'm kind of doing something a little bit different, which I think is pretty par for the course for most people. A lot of times your expectations don't align with your reality.
Mhm.
So just kind of walk us through what started your career and then how it's progressed to now, because I know there's a lot of in between then
Right.
and now.
What I would really say actually started my career was so I was at WKU corp com major, and you had to have an internship. And I didn't really know like where to go, what I wanted to do. The great thing about that major is you can do anything, and the bad thing about that major is you can do anything.
Mm,
So I got hooked up with the Alumni Association. They needed an intern, and so I was on campus. I took it, and a couple of things happened. One, I had great people to work for, great mentors. Back then, I thought they were so old. Now I realize they're like 6 years older than me. But I was exposed to a whole new world. I was exposed to alumni, very successful people who had come to WKU, but then now they're giving back. They're either giving back their time or their resources in very generous ways.
Mhm.
And that was just a whole new thing to me. What I didn't mention earlier is I'm a pastor's daughter my entire life. So I'm used to people giving of their time.
Mhm.
That wasn't a shock, except it was a shock to give it to university. But for people to give tens of thousands, 100,000s, millions of dollars, that was just so foreign to me. I
Yeah.
mean, there's not a tithe happening at my church that looks like that.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's just the whole thing of you don't know what you don't know. I got exposed to a whole new world and just kind of opened my eyes to possibilities. Right.
Mhm.
So from there, I just had great relationships. I've always had a theme of just going above and beyond, just going all in. I'm kind of all in employee. I'm not a punch the clock and just do what I'm told to do. I want to do more, and I want to be the ambassador for wherever I'm at. Love it that much. So that was what I was for WKU. And then after graduation, pushed out into the real world in 2003. And there wasn't just much out there. And of course, I didn't have a direction of where I really wanted to go. So I'm kind of shooting everywhere,
Mhm.
not really concentrated. And so I ended up selling insurance for Aflac. They have great marketing, but it was not for me. I know a lot of people have made great careers at Aflac,
Mhm.
but it just wasn't for me. But I did learn a lot from it. That's when I knew you just had to have your heart in it, or at least I did, to be able
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to do something like that. So then, and that was like independent contractor work. So I was, going just, I didn't have to report anywhere, but you also don't get paid unless you sell. And it was supplemental insurance. So from there, I got a job in mortgage servicing. It was just a friend who said, "Hey, there's a job open." And I was like, "Oh, it's a steady paycheck and
Right.
normal." And I hated that
Oh
job. I
no.
hated, like, I had to clock into this time. I couldn't clock out a minute before or after. And
That's the worst.
it was just like the chains are on, the shackles. So I didn't last there very long. But again, I learned a lot. Like, I can look back on all these experiences and like, well, I did take something from
Right.
that. Some of it's just life experience,
Mhm.
and then from there, I made it back to the Hill, working in institutional advancement, fundraising as a researcher. And quite honestly, I knew nothing about research. Once again, networking and connections, which, to anyone watching, that is the name of the game. It's
Massive.
so
Yeah.
important for so many reasons, not just with work, but uh, got in as a researcher, which what would happen is I would just research the alums or foundations or whatever of like who has the capacity to give back, who
Mm.
might have the propensity to want to do that. And then I would feed information to the development officers who were asking for the money, or to the president of the university at the time, was Dr. Rinsdale.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just what I did. But again, now that I know what I know about working genius, I was not working my genius. I
Mhm.
was stuck behind a desk, and I wasn't, my geniuses are discernment and galvanizing. And so that I was more in a enablement and tenacity role. And that's
Mhm.
just, but I didn't have that language at the time. So, but I did from there advance into my genius, which I became a development officer. So that galvanizing and getting out and meeting people and selling them on the university, got to travel the country, which quite honestly, before that, I'd only been to Kentucky and Florida,
Oh wow.
Tennessee. I just
Yeah.
haven't done much. So I was, going to Houston and Atlanta and Florida and Kentucky, and just meeting people, very successful people, again, learning their stories, and just like picking up on all the things that people did to get to where they are, kind of opened my eyes, and honestly just probably set me on a path, not really knowing at the time, but working at the university, just the red tape of a government agency, essentially,
Mhm.
and just how slow things went, were just sucking the life out of my soul, quite
Yeah.
honestly. And so at the time, locally, there was a club. The club at Old Stone was opening, and they were looking for a director of sales. And so I went for it. And I remember when I got it, I had people at WKU telling me like, oh, "Man, this is really risky." And I was like, "Risky?" But I was just like, I just realized that we're just all different, right?
Yeah.
Some, for WKU, some people, that was just a very safe place to be, and it is a safe
Mhm.
place to be, and that's great. And that's what some people love, but I just needed a little bit more. And so I went to work for a local entrepreneur who had big dreams. I mean, if anybody knows Jim Scott, he did not grow up in the golf business. He grew up in the highway contracting business,
Mhm.
and this is just a huge dream. So I was very inspired by him, uh, for just going after what you want. I also learned so much about business and Mr. Scott and I have talked about this a lot. I was there when they first started. And so when I would sit in financial meetings, I didn't realize that financials are supposed to be in black because most of our stuff was in red. But that's the name of a startup. And when we were there, we made some great progress to turn things around. And really, I sold the heck out of that place, just getting new people in. But again, I loved going to different towns and recruiting people. It was all about building a community, really. And I wanted to connect members with other members because the more they had friends there, the more they would come there and not just sell the membership. So really love that. Was there for 4 years. And then the good folks at Blue Cotton kind of recruited me. And I came over I left the sales side and moved to operations, which was much different. I wanted it at the time, but pretty soon after coming to Blue Cotton, I kind of worked my way back into a sales role unofficially. But the funny thing is that I had been a customer of Blue Cotton when I was a college student at Western. So I'd met the whole crew then, and then I tried to sell them insurance. And then when I worked at Old Stone, actually, I tried to raise money from one of them at WKU. And then when I went to Old Stone, they were members there. So I kept running into them all the time and just had a great relationship. And so just the timing, everything, when they were looking for someone to lead their kind of customer service sales team and I was looking to make a change, it all worked out. And so we ended up together.
Wow. Yeah, that's a long journey through there. But it's all practical stuff. Like, I think one thing that you said that really stood out to me, and I had a similar experience on a little smaller scale, was it's just as important to figure out what you don't want to do as it is to figure out what you do want to do.
Right.
And when I was in college, I studied sport management and I minored in facility and event management. I just needed a minor. And it was the summer going into my senior year at Western, I needed an internship. I wanted to do an internship. It wasn't required. And I knew I wanted to leave Kentucky. I wanted to leave Bowling Green. So I took an unpaid internship in Atlanta. So basically, I saved as much as I could for 6 months, because that's about the amount of the heads up that I had, and moved just outside of Atlanta, rented a long-term Airbnb, paid for it all myself. I mean, I came back with literally $12 in my bank account. Like, I had nothing. And I was like, I want to work in marketing. And this was like advertised as, and I learned a lot here. Nothing against the company. I stuck it out the whole summer. I met amazing people, really good friends who I still talk to. It was advertised as a sport marketing agency. So in my head, I'm like, I'm going to go and I'm going to work with Atlanta sports teams, Atlanta athletes.
Pros.
It was a marketing agency. And so basically you go in and if you don't know how a marketing agency is structured, it's essentially you go in, it's a company and they are a third party that other companies use to run marketing for them, like whether it's social media, communications, website design or build, or what this agency was well known for was event activations. So we did a lot of stuff with Coca-Cola, which was really cool. But I soon found out I do not want to work in a marketing agency because it's just pretty much live events year round. And you're traveling for it. It's just a lot. And that is, ever since then, I've said that it's just as important to figure out what you don't want to do as it is to figure out what you do want to do.
Right.
And the only way to really truly figure that out is through practical experience. And it sounds like you had a lot of that to figure it out.
And didn't set out looking to weed out the things I didn't want to do, but yeah.
It just naturally happened.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. And another thing too, and I'm obsessed with this quote. I'm like giving you all the mantras today. But I figured out this, or I learned this quote last week. A good friend of mine, we were running together and we were talking about books we've read and just kind of having deep conversation. And he said this phrase, "Who dares wins." And I believe it's like the British forces use that. It was originated from them before they went on a mission. And they said, "Who dares wins." And they basically said that the mission they were on, every single one of them are going to be daring greatly tonight, but for the greater good. And you can just apply that to so many areas of your life. Who dares wins. If you're willing to take a chance, if you're willing to step out of your comfort zone, if you're willing to stand up for values that other people won't stand up for, you're the one that's going to win.
Right.
Whether it comes out on how you expected it to, or it goes a totally different way. I think it's just a powerful trait to have, is to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And
I love that quote.
Yeah. And so it's been like heavy on my mind lately, just who dares wins, who dares wins. And that's like all I've been able to think about and trying to implement that into my daily life, whether it's at home, at work, all of that. And I think that it kind of goes into the, like the trait of having initiative. Like that's not something you really can teach. But the good thing about having so much initiative, and that's one thing I've been trying to get better at, is in my head I have all these ideas like this initiative, and the way I try to make myself feel better about taking initiative is like that can be dialed back, but it's really hard to like force somebody to have more of that and more of
Right.
that. And it sounds like, I mean, you know a lot about that. I mean, you weaseled, like you said, you wiggled your way into this role where you really wanted to be within what, a year of being a Blue Cotton. So talk about that more, so like the journey at Blue Cotton, because there's a story that goes along with that,
Yeah.
right? So I want to hear about that.
Well, so yes, had been in sales, in some form of sales, for so long, and then came over there in operations. And for me, it was a leap as far as managing a team. So this entire time I've been working, I hadn't managed anyone officially. Everyone has their unofficial influence, but I think I had a team of 8 or 10 in 2 different locations and managing them. And honestly, that came. We have not interviewed the people I managed, but I think that came pretty easy to me.
We'll get them on next
Yeah, I'm
episode.
sure there's some complaints out there, but that was very exciting, and quite honestly, like, that excitement lasted a year. And then, you get just into you're down to, this is the day to day, and this is how I work with people. I think what it was really attracting to me for Blue Cotton was the culture. Like, I never intended to work for a screen printing company. I wasn't seeking that out. I had no experience, no interest really, but I had very much interest in that culture. And when I was making the move from Old Stone, I was very intentional about, at this point in my career, I was 30. I wanted it to be a strategic move, as far as like very thoughtful of like, do their values align with mine? Am I going to be happy here? Like, can this be like a long-term thing? So again, wasn't looking for screen printing, but the culture really appealed to me. And I knew the people enough and knew enough of just the business. What I loved about it was, and they said in my interview, they're like, pretty much if you need hand holding, you're not going to like it here. And I'm like, nope, no hand holding needed.
Yeah.
That's like music to my ears, because I'd left all the places that just felt like they locked you down. So with that being said, it was a very entrepreneurial spirit for those who wanted it. And I just was able to see some opportunities. One thing at the time, monogramming was huge. If you're in the South,
Oh,
ladies,
yeah.
you would know it was huge. And we had all the machines to do it. We had the garments. We even had the customers. We just didn't have a way to put it online. And so actually a girl that was working for me was like, well, why don't we just do it on Etsy? Well, at the time I hadn't even really heard of Etsy. So there's other entrepreneurial people around me, which is such a fun environment to be in. So we just tinker around with it. I think I might have asked like, hey, is it okay if we do this? And they probably never thought it would be anything. So we pretty much created we didn't call it Blue Cotton. We called it something else on Etsy, but we were running an Etsy store out of Blue Cotton.
Oh, wow.
And it quickly caught on to 1 year we did like $250,000 in sales.
Oh my
and
gosh.
the average order value was like $30. So, most of that happened at Christmas time, but even just figuring out, I was running a business without spending my own money, essentially. Thank goodness it worked out. But, just figuring out like, oh, we can't turn product this fast. So maybe I should bring in inventory. How much inventory should I bring? What are the processes? How can I figure all this out? So it was just the driving force of all these ideas, and how do we make this happen, and not really asking for help, because we figured it out. But I think it was several years before the owners really realized like what's happening over there and how much traffic is coming in. So it was a great thing for a long time. Eventually that we shut it down. Just, we moved on to other things, but it was enough to like keep the juices running of when I kind of got used to the managing of people, though. Okay, here's another thing to kind of keep my attention, just that ambition of wanting to just learn more, do more. So yeah.
Wow. That's cool. So now let's talk about how this kind of turned into the partner role with Blue Cotton. Cause I know that is, I mean, you weren't, I guess when you were in at that point, whenever like the Etsy stage, the Etsy chapter of your career at Blue Cotton, did you have any intentions or any idea that it could turn into like a partner role for you?
Right. I really wish I could sit here and say I knew from the beginning I was going to be a partner at Blue Cotton. The honest truth is it never once crossed my mind that I could be a part of it. I interviewed telling them I used to think I wanted to own a business, but after working for Mr. Scott, I've changed my mind. And they all laughed because they knew how hard it was to run a business. And there were several partners at the time. There were 3. And I just kind of thought, oh, well, it's locked in and that's not going to change. And it just never occurred to me to even ask. And so, yeah, the way it came about, I mean, it's kind of a long story, but
That's okay. I
it's
think
a
it's
little bit of timing.
yeah.
And um, I tell you, like, all these things happen. I would get really excited about something and move on, and then I would just kind of like, okay, like, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
What's going to happen? And anything I say now, my partner, we've had very direct conversations about this, so he already knows. But um, there's a time when Blue Cotton, we started to go through some trouble just with our technology, and sales were starting to dip. And so it was just a really trying time for the ownership at the time. And of course, I was part of leadership. So for me, I was like locking arms with them. I was all in it. I don't think they really saw it that way because I didn't have skin in the game as far
Mm.
as, the financial burden
Right,
of it.
right.
But we just kind of lost our way. We didn't like we didn't have a vision of where we were going. And if we did, it wasn't communicated to the people. And so for me, I just realized, like, okay, so what are we doing? Like, you just want me to come in here and do this every single day? And for a lot of people, that's great. For me, that wasn't going to work. And so I, try to make several attempts to figure this all out. And it was just a tough time for everybody. And so I started looking elsewhere. I just knew, like, this isn't going to work. I'm not happy here. Like, I'm miserable here. Then I go home and it kind of drags everything else
Mhm.
down. So I started looking. I mean, I felt like I was pretty desirable candidate for other people, and I knew a lot of people. And so I started getting some interviews, and I wasn't getting hired. And I remember always struggling when the question came up of, like, well, why are you looking? And in your mind, you're like, well, do you mean to tell you the truth, or
Right.
do I give you that answer? And so I tried to do my best, but I have no doubt that just the discontent, just the frustration I felt was coming through, because I just really wasn't clear about what I was going after. I was just trying to get out of there,
Mhm.
and I wasn't really trying to advance myself. I just wanted to get out of a bad situation. And so, knowing what I know now, I have no doubt that that was showing through, and I got passed over for many things. And so finally, I was just like, this, I don't know what's happening. And I was just tired. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do what everyone else does. I'm just going to go to work, and maybe I'll work on a side project at work, or a side project at home, or whatever. I'm just going to, like, be happy. And there's other reasons why I couldn't just leave at that point.
Mhm.
And so when I started focusing off of, like, trying to get out of a situation and just trying to be happy, you have to do a lot of, like, inward
Oh, yeah.
looking, and that's just terrible.
Mhm.
It's not the easiest thing to do. Um, about that time, my husband and I, we were trying to start a family. That was a very long process for us.
Mhm.
Lots of heartbreak. About 5 years of that. That was looking like it wasn't going to happen, and so, yeah, there was just a lot of, like, personal development that happened at the time. And I can't. There's a lot of discontentment at work. I'm sure that it was just a whole mixture of, like, life in general.
Right, yeah.
And so, um, we finally did, have a child, and is our angel baby. And, like, when we had him, it was just like life is complete. Like,
Mm.
there's just this. I was euphoric after I had.
Mhm.
My mom was like, "Are you okay? Like, are you having any?" Like, I'm great. I love
Right.
everyone,
Yeah.
and I was very lucky to have that experience. But it was just like something clicked, and I'm like, I have a reason. Like, I was looking for, what are we doing at Blue Cotton? What's the vision? And it's like, now I have my life vision. And when I had that settled, then everything else just wasn't that big of a deal.
Mm.
And so I kept coming to work because I had a job that I had a pretty flexible schedule, and I could get home and see my family, which is what I really wanted to do. And when I came back from maternity leave, I got to get out in the community more, which I love. My
Mhm.
husband says, put Julie in the middle of a room with a ton of people, and she's like so happy.
Mhm.
He'll wait for me by the door. So, yeah, it just, everything kind of clicked. So from then, I was just like, I'm just going to help the people that are here, and I'm going to go home and see my family.
Yeah.
So as problems would come up, there would be a customer issue. And so I'd work with my team because they're customer facing. I'm like, oh, well, really, that's a issue in receiving. So I'm like, well, what's going on receiving? I would just go back there and be like, what's going on? So then I would learn receiving. I'm like, oh, well, here's the issue. Okay, we need to fix this. And I go back up. I'm like, okay, are you good? Because I just wanted to fix it for my team, because
Mhm.
I want them to get yelled at by a customer. Different things like that would happen all the time. We would get behind in production. Well, why are we behind in production? Oh, we're taking on too much work. Well, I'll do a production forecast. And then I'm like accepting work at what we can actually do, and just different things like that. Well, you do that enough, and people start to notice
Mm.
looking back. And so then I started getting asked, like, well, what do you think about this? Or let's ask Julie this, or hey, will you come in this meeting and tell us? And all of a sudden I was just at the table more. Even though I'd always been in leadership, I was being heard more. And so again, at that point, I'm not looking for anything. I'm just like doing a good job at work and connecting with my people, and then I'm gonna go home and be with my family. And then I don't know, just got into a groove and things started to change with our partners there. One partner left, which never thought that would happen. And when he left, I was offered to buy in.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, we gotta pay to get in.
Yeah.
Like that's how green I was. But it was a very, very, very small percentage, but it might as well been the world to
Oh
me.
yeah, I'm sure.
And we never disclosed the percentages, but I walked around like I was an equal partner. But you know what? I was, because I was putting in the work. I didn't have the financial burden or the history or the pressure that they had all those years, but I was putting in the work and I was making contributions to get us through. So I bought in July of 2019. If you remember what happened in 2020,
Yeah.
Our business is where people get together in person. And so when everything gets shut down, we're in a pickle. We do pivot, which is just the story of Blue Cotton. Like we're fighters. They call them Mike calls us bulldogs, our founder. That we're just always going to keep after it, and we did. So we pivoted to making masks, which we don't make masks. We don't have sewing machines. We have embroidery machines. There's a huge difference. We never shut down. We kept our people, but we were working crazy shifts. We were working 14, 16-hour days. I would come in, work all day. I'd go home, have dinner with my family, put my son to bed, and I'd go back to work just to keep it all going. And so we made it through. It wasn't a great year. We were still profitable, but just by a smidge. And then the next year, I believe we had a tornado.
Yep.
In Bowling Green, and it was just all kinds of stuff happening. But about that time, I started realizing like I'm putting in a lot of work, and if I'm going to do this, like I'm going to need a bigger piece of the pie to make it worth it. So I went to Mike and I said, "Hey, what do you think?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm not going to sell anymore, but why don't you go talk to the other partner?" And so I went to him just thinking, I'll just ask for what the other guy had. And so I was not thinking big enough, but I just went in and be like, I just want what he had. Can I have some of that? And so when I went in, I said, hey, would you sell me this piece? And he said, well, I'll sell you that piece or I'll just sell you all of it. And I wasn't prepared for that. And so we had a conversation after that, but I could not tell you what we said because all I could think about was like, I've got to buy the whole thing. Like as soon as he said it, it was the first time I thought of it, but I was like, I have to do it. I do not have that money. I have no idea how to get that money, but it's going to happen. And so that was in June of 21. It took us like 4 or 5 months to just deliberate and go back and forth. Most of that was just me really trying to get settled on, is this what I want to do? Is this where I'm going to put my eggs, in this basket? And what does that mean? And what does that mean if it goes wrong? What does that mean for my family? How do I get the money? And this is where networking comes in because, I did have some help and one of the banks really just gave me a loan on character.
Wow.
Quite honestly. I mean, there wasn't a lot of dollars to back it up. And even the performance of Blue Cotton at the time wasn't super hopeful. But just having that relationship over the years and just, networking, they're like, I know this person enough that we're going to bet on her. And so thankful that's worked out for all of us. So in 2022, I bought out that partner. Mike and I have teamed up ever since. And we've just been on an incredible ride. I know it won't always be this way, but we got super clear about who we are as a company, where we're going, and committed to zero distractions. And so I always say clarity is freedom. Like when you're so clear about where you're going, everything else is really simple. It's a simple yes or no. Because if it doesn't fall along in that path, then we just don't do it. So many times we kind of circle up and we're like, okay, like, is this a distraction? And if it is, then we're just, going a different direction. And we've just stayed on course, and we've really done things and accomplished things we never thought we could or would, or even weren't on the page at the time when we partnered up. But it's just been a great ride. So it's been almost 3 years now.
Wow, that is so cool. See, I love that. Long story is worth it because I love hearing the process of what that looks like, because when people think of buying a business, you kind of, I think it's naive of us to sometimes think it's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna buy the person out, boom, it's done. Like it does not look like that at all. And when Kevin bought MoveWell earlier this year, it was kind of the same thing. Like I saw the process kind of in like the back seat of seeing what it looked like and how much deliberating it is
Mhm.
between whatever parties are involved, and then figuring out like the financial situation. There's a lot
Right.
that goes into that.
I think the thing that I wasn't expecting is how much I needed to protect my mind.
Mm.
Um, I'm kind of a lone thinker. And this is that discernment part is like, I really need to work things out in my head before I'm ready to talk about them. Cause I just can't allow others to sway or influence my decisions until my heart's like where it needs to be. And so that process was very challenging for my husband because, we don't want to talk about it. I'm like, I'm still just like working through it. I think it was challenging for the person I was buying out. It's like, where are we? I'm like, still working through it.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's just like when it happens, it happens. And then I'm like solid. But I will say, it was just really surprising to me, like the people who have opinions about things that don't affect them at all.
Mm.
And so that's why I think protecting your mindset in many things, not just being a business owner, but being a parent. People have opinions about how you should raise your
Oh yeah.
children, where your kids should go to school. And I think just like protecting your mindset, if it's just you or you and your spouse, is like so important to really get to where you need to be.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think it's hard because you do want to talk about exciting things going on, and it can be really easy for you to express that to somebody and they shoot it down, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
their own insecurities or if they genuinely feel a certain way. But at the end of the day, they're not the one that's going to be controlling the business. It's going to be you
Right.
and your partner, right? So I think it's important in it. I'm sure that was a sole contributor to you having as clear of a vision as you could of your decision making process.
Right.
So
Well, I just knew once I signed the papers, like you can't be doubting it at that point. Like I have to be all in and we're not looking back. Like it's do or die.
yeah. What did that feel like?
Oh my gosh. I think it was more, it's not so much when I signed the papers. I think my bank person said, "Are you ready to go deep in debt?" And thought that was funny. It's very true. I think I panicked more when I had to sign over like that I could sign checks for the business, or I started getting some like access to things like that. And it took me like a year and a half before I ever signed a check. I was too scared to do that.
Gosh.
So that's when it felt real. But yeah.
That is so cool. So throughout the journey that you've had, like not just Blue Cotton, like we've been talking about, but when you first started up until now, what would you say, whether it's a period or it's a specific moment or a specific job, what do you feel was the most challenging time in your career, and how did that play out?
Yeah, honestly, I think COVID was a very challenging time. And here's why. I had just bought into the business. Like I said, it was a small percentage, but I still had a payment to make in July of 2020. And
That was right when stuff started really
yes,
shutting down
and
too.
we get dividends from the company, but it wasn't going to be very large because I had a very small percentage and I only owned part of the company for 6 months of 2019. And then there just really wasn't much coming in. So I had a big payment for myself at the time to make in the middle of 2020, and just thinking like, what have I done? Is this even worth it? I'm working my tail off. Like my family's at home. Like, everyone's struggling, right? There's just a lot going on. And so, there was something in me that felt like it was worth it, although it looked like it was all just going to down the drain. Not that Blue Cotton was, but just everything. It just didn't feel like it was going to recover.
Yeah.
But I mean, during that time, us pivoting to make masks, even though it was a lot of hard work, it was exciting because we were solving a problem and we were getting it done and we were providing work for our people. And I don't know, just all the hard work kept us going. But it was a really challenging time of like just
uncertainty,
very much uncertain. And how am I going to make my very first payment? It didn't feel like a good time to go to the partners and be like, we're in the middle of a crisis here. Can I get an extension like on my first payment? So, that was a challenging time. And really for the first few years, it was challenging to make those payments just because the company wasn't performing as great as we'd all hoped. But then, we've turned that around. So it's just sticking with it and having the faith that and putting in the hard work. I mean, I was one of those people that can make a difference in it. And so it was kind of up to me to make that happen. And if the partners do well, the whole company's doing well, the employees are doing well. So everyone like just digging in.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the flip side of that, where do you feel that you've grown the most from when you first started up until now? Or have you been able to reflect on that?
When I first started at Blue Cotton,
Yeah.
yes, I think. Well, I mean, I'm much older now,
Wiser.
wiser. Thank you. Someone else said that to me today. Being more bold and um, just sticking with what I know is right. And so being willing to question, like, no, wait a second, let's look at all this. Is this the, or stick my nose in places where maybe I wouldn't have been before. It's a challenge. Like, we haven't talked about this, going from an employee to an owner of the same place. My partner was the founder. He's never been an employee. And so he's looked at in one way, and I was working side by side with everyone on the same level. And then you transition to an owner. Not that that was a big deal for everybody, but I kind of had to change my mindset a little bit about not being pulled into certain things, or, you have more information and more insight and a bigger view. And then the people who are used to working with you side by side, it's just like there is a difference that has to happen. So just being bold in that, also dreaming really big. I wasn't dreaming big until I bought, really. And then from there, I've just been the one, for that first year, how many times did I say, okay, I'll believe it until everyone else does. And I would just put this out there. And then eventually everyone started believing it because we made it happen. But it's just challenging everyone to think a little bit bigger of like, well, why not us? Like, Blue Cotton is enough. Like, we can do this, and let's bet on ourselves. So that's been really fun that the team has kind of come along with that. And now we have lots of people dreaming big about Blue Cotton and what we could be and what we could do, and then going after it. We're not just dreaming, we're acting on it.
Yeah.
So that's the fun part.
So what do you feel this, I'm teeing you up here for a good question for you to sell it. So when people hear Blue Cotton, when employees think of their workplace, what do you want people to think or see whenever they hear Blue Cotton?
Well, I think that they should know that at Blue Cotton, what we do is we develop people, and we just happen to print t-shirts on the side. And so the thing is, like, we're not just saying that, like, it's actually the truth. We put tons of hours every single week into just people development. So my first year, 2022, as a partner, I was speaking to one of my good friends here in town, who's also a pastor, and just talking about some different work challenges and just people challenges. And he said, Julie, this isn't hard. I remember thinking, like, well, it feels pretty hard right now. Like, this situation seems pretty hard. He's like, no, it's not hard. Like, loving people is not hard. And inside, I kind of did an eye roll because I'm like, that's just such a Sunday school answer, Now that I'm into it, though, I realize it's not hard, because when you do just love people and when you humanize the employee, the team member, then it gets to be really easy of figuring out just how to develop everyone. So everyone has different backgrounds. We've had different experiences. We're all bringing that into our day-to-day work. And we started a couple of groups recently. Well, in the last 2 years, we have 2 groups that we meet an hour with each week. It's about a third of our workforce. And all it is about personal development.
Oh, wow.
We rarely talk about Blue Cotton in there. We've read books, we've listened to podcasts, we've done exercises, we've done all different types of things. And when you get to know each other like that and realize, like, we're all living the same life, we're all struggling with the same things or trying to be better, then it just makes it really easy. So when we've started becoming a people first company, and I know that's like a thing people say, but like, we really are people first, and looking at the individual, just like I told you, the working genius, like, we're not just we have to get the job done. We're a business. We have to make profits so that we can pay people and be great partners. But when we look at the people and try to make the best fits and give people challenging and fulfilling work and help them develop outside of Blue Cotton as well. Because if they can develop outside of Blue Cotton, they bring that person into Blue Cotton. They also take that person out into the community, and it makes it for stronger communities too. So we feel like it wouldn't necessarily be a benefit back to Blue Cotton directly, but that it's going to be a benefit to everyone around us. So we've really gone all in on it, and it's the most exciting thing that we're doing, and I would say the most fulfilling part of what we're doing. And it just makes it a great place to be.
Yeah. Well, when you pump into the people that when you take care of the people at your company, that how you treat them is going to reflect to your customers and the people that interact with them, right? And I mean, whenever we approached you all and we're asking you to help us a lot, and it's a lot. If we were to just go out and purchase the shirts that you all did for the Hot Rod Ultra, like monetarily, it's going to be way, way more than what it should have been. So having people that we can comfortably ask those questions to and ask them to make changes, and when they give us recommendations and we're like, well, we kind of wanted it this way, we never had any hiccups. We never had anybody made us feel a certain way about that. So when you pump in to the people and take care of your people at Blue Cotton, like that 100% reflects how they're going to treat the customers and the people they interact with.
Well, what I've learned is I don't really think there are many people who just want to punch a clock and do their work and go home.
Mm-mm.
There's an element of every person who wants to feel that they belong. They want to know, like, where are we going? What's the vision? How do I play into this? Some want different levels of that, but everyone wants a sense of belonging there. And so we've had to be very intentional about making sure we're sharing that vision. I mean, for one, you have to have a vision, and then you have to share it, and you have to say it over and over and over again. And then when you're tired of saying it, you keep saying it, just to bring everybody on. But the benefit that we've seen the most is just the engagement. When you have that many people who are, having these collective experiences and can talk about things, and it just reflects on their work. It just reflects on how we feel. We have so many guests who we love to do tours, and when people come through, everybody's like, everyone seems happy. Like they're so shocked. Like they think that everyone would just be sad working at a machine, but that's just not the environment that we have. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is super special. I mean, not a lot of times you hear that.
Yeah.
And I think the culture in the workplace has changed, and employees want more, and especially the younger demographic, like they're kind of demanding more, and that kind of goes back to the ego thing. As a leader and as a business, as a company, as an organization, you have to be able to put your ego aside, listen to your people, and at the end of the day, as cliche as it sounds, you want to treat people like you want to be treated,
right?
And I think that is how you lead. That's how you lead people,
right.
And I think you guys are doing an amazing job of that, and I'm grateful that we've discovered a relationship with you all that we can hopefully keep going forward. And hopefully other leaders can listen to this and understand it can be done. It's not something you see in a movie or in a documentary. It can happen right here in Bowling Green.
But it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
So, we're 3 years in nearly, and I can really see the momentum now, and which just excites us for, like, what can we do next with, everyone. I think it brings challenges of, okay, how do we continue elevating everyone and fulfilling their needs, or maybe we need to understand that at some point, maybe we're not going to be enough for some of our team members, and we need to help them move on. And how do we do that? Do we just say, okay, let us know when you put in your notice? No, we connect them with other people. Like we don't want to lose anybody, but if they have better opportunities and it can advance themselves, then we want to support them in that way. So we've celebrated several people leaving over the last year that in the past, we probably would have been a little like, frustrated about, but we're like, you know what? They came in here, they contributed, they realized they wanted something more for themselves, and they went after it. Like that's going to be celebrated. So it's been a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, that is so cool. Well, we got to get to the inevitable Wheel of Fortune. We got to talk about it. We got to talk about it. So, and really, I think it's cool to just share the experience and talk about how that played out. When we were talking offline, I said, I just want you to share like the process of things you've done, because I think that's where people can find the most insight. And something like Wheel of Fortune, like that's, for me, I'm obsessed with Survivor. I've applied to get on the show hundreds of times.
You're brave.
And and so I think part of that is like just being able to put yourself out there.
So you have applied?
I've applied, multiple times to be on the show. And that kind of goes back to the same thing for you, like with Wheel of Fortune. Like, how did you had to take the initiative to apply to get on the show, right? So talk about that, what that looked like. What was the process of it? What prompted you to go for it, and how it played out?
Well, I mentioned that angel baby I had. He's the one who just called me out on it. So growing up, Wheel of Fortune's always been on the TV, right? Around dinner time, usually at the grandparents' house. And I always thought it was such a lame show. It's like what old people watched. And then I got older,
old people,
and they probably weren't that old. I thought they were old. I don't know. I just started watching, and then I started being able to solve puzzles, and then it just became my kind of a thing. I'm like, oh, I love this. And so my husband and I used to have it on our phone, and we would play each other, and I would win. And so I would always joke, like, man, I would be such a great contestant. And even my people at work, people on my team knew that I loved Wheel of Fortune. And when I was expecting, the way that I told my team was I made up my own Wheel of Fortune puzzle. So I told them it was training. The first 2 puzzles had to do with their work. The last puzzle was, what are you doing? And then the puzzle was having a baby. And so that's like the level of my
That is
fandom.
cool. Yeah.
I wasn't like a fan of Pat or anything. I just wanted to go to the show. I thought it was super cool and competitive. So I wanted to do that. But for years, said it. My son, so that was in 22. So he was 5. And just one day sitting in the chair together watching, he's like, Mommy, and, those sweet little voice. He's like, why do you like this show? And I just told him, I was like, oh, I just love it. And I can solve the puzzles. And he's like, well, then why haven't you done it? And in his mind, he's like, oh, you see something, you do it. And in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, like, dang it. Like, that's a great question. And again, just, I'd always said I'd be a great contestant, but I never really thought I should actually do it. I've just always kind of joked about it. And like I said, the vision of my life just kind of came to be when he came around. I was just very clear about what I wanted to do and be for him. And I've always wanted to be the example that he sees, that you do go after things and you say what you're going to do and you're not scared and you try. And so as soon as he said that, I was like, man, like, I'm going to have to do this.
He simplified it for you, huh?
He did. Made it very clear. And so, kind of weeks went by and I went up and saw my friend in New York and I was flying home, and just on the plane, I was like, this is the week, like, I'm going to do it. So I came home, I told my husband this week. He was like, okay, this week. And so one day it was me and my son, and it was just because it was after COVID, it was just an online form, and you could just fill out the form and be done, or you could send a video. And I'm like, oh, well, we're sending a video. Yeah. And so Grady and I filmed a video. I was filming it and he was outside, and halfway through my video, he just walked through and he was like, Wheel of Fortune. And so I cut the video. I was like, okay, you have to do that again.
Oh my gosh.
But I'm not going to tell you when, but you just do it at any point. So I had to tell them why I wanted to be on there. And then he comes through and that's the video. And so I sent it off. And honestly, at that point, I was like, I'm done. I have fulfilled my commitment to my son. I told him I applied. And then we're coming home from vacation, like in July, and I get this email saying, you've been selected to audition. And it honestly, it was like a Word document. I was like, this is such a scam. Like, who is scamming me right now? But I didn't answer it on the way home from Florida because, we're traveling. And so on that next Tuesday, I went to, you have to like grab a spot. And when I went to go grab a spot, all the spots were filled. And I had like a meltdown. Like, I've missed my chance. Like, they invited me and I can't get out. So I'm like frantically emailing every contact I can find saying, like, you invited me, but there's not enough spots. So they're like, don't worry, we'll get you on the next round. So I felt a little bit better. Next week, I get another invite. I book immediately. So they were doing virtual auditions. And so my husband took my son to soccer practice, and I'm sitting at our dining room table, all dressed up and ready. So you come on, there's like an auditioner, and then there's 2 other people trying to get on the show. And we had like to play a game of Wheel of Fortune. So you didn't have real buzzers. So you'd have a pin and you have to say, like, you have to yell at your name. So that lightning round, like at the very beginning, we did several of those. And I don't know, I think there were like 5 or 6 puzzles and I got like 3 or 4 of them. So I was like, okay, like, we're doing good here. Yeah. And then they take you into these private virtual rooms. And like the puzzles at the very end where there's already some letters showing, they had at a category, and then they would show 4 puzzles, and you just try to solve as many as you can. So I think there were 16 puzzles, and I solved like 11 of the 16 or 12 of the 16. So I still felt pretty good about that. But, I didn't know how everybody else did. So they said at the very end, they're like, well, that's the end of audition. If you don't hear from us, it probably didn't work out for you. But if, we'll call you if you need things. So the next week, I was in a meeting with my partner, which I had not breathed a word to anybody about this.
Oh, really? You kept it to yourself?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I have to protect the dream, So we were sitting in a meeting and I see this email pop up. We're in my office, Wheel of Fortune. And I'm like, holy crap. And so it says, like, you have been selected. And I had to be out there in 2 weeks. And so as soon as that meeting wrapped up, I call my husband and we're just like freaking out. And so then we have to like get flights and book all the things. I have to find somebody to take care of my son. We'd all talked about if I got on the show, we'd all go as a family. And then he couldn't go because she had to be 8 years old. So there was like major letdown there.
Oh, no.
The funniest story from that is I told him, I was like, I'm so sorry, buddy, but you have to be 8. And he's like, well, you're not 8. And I was like, you're right.
8 only.
8
8
only.
only. Yeah. He simplified the process again.
Yeah, he's right on it. But yeah, we went out there. It was amazing. I mean, California is beautiful, a little crazy, but beautiful. And we had to go the day before, get COVID tested. We didn't want to make Pat sick. And then the day of, we actually that whole morning we're on the set of Jeopardy, their sister studio. So they're right across.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So we got there at 7:00 in the morning. It's a whole day process. They shoot an entire week of shows in one day.
Wow.
So the people who audition, you kind of decide who's going to be on each show. You go through hair and makeup. We went over to Wheel of Fortune. When I first walked in and I saw the wheel, my first thought was, it is so much smaller in person.
Is it really?
Well, I don't know that it is, but in my mind,
your expectation was...
in my mind, it was much bigger. Now, when I watched the show before Ryan Seacrest, I was like, no, that's the size. But in my mind, it was just like this huge wheel. So we got to practice spinning before, and they would tell us exactly how to spin, and it was during Christmas, so we had to do this whole because like people at home could win too, so you had to do this whole like intro. Felt so silly doing that. That's not really my thing. I'm like, can I just play the game?
Yeah,
So they do 3 shows, then they break for lunch, and then they do the final 2. And so I really did not want to have to stay past lunch, so I got like the 3rd show of the day, and then I got the 3rd spot. So I was in the blue spot. I was so stinking nervous.
I bet.
I was so nervous. My husband went with me, and of course I never could look over that way, but it goes by super fast. I mean, it's only a 30-minute show with commercials, so you're taping less than 20 minutes. I knew I wanted to win the prize puzzle. I hit bankrupt twice on the prize puzzle, but I solved 3 or 4 puzzles. It was super cool. But I just remember, like, when the lights were going down and they were about to come out, I just remember thinking, you manifested this.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, this is the moment, like, get it together. It's really what I was saying in my mind. I was like, don't screw this up. So yeah, it was really cool.
That is awesome.
Yes. Vanna White was amazing. She's so personable. She came out and met everybody before she ever had makeup on.
Wow.
And I was like, this is the real Vanna White. Like, I think I could have invited her over for dinner or something.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So what do you have, like a season episode like that we could refer to?
No, they put it up for a little while and then they took it down.
Gotcha.
So,
I wondered how they did that. Okay.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I didn't win. I came in second, but we did get a little prize. Here's what I will say about all of that. I cannot tell you how many people, once they learned I was going to be on the show and then after watching me, said to me, I mean, many, I've always wanted to do that. And the only difference between me and them is that I took action and that I applied. Now, I realize that there's things that come into play after that, but you are never going to get selected if you never apply. And so it's just like taking that action. It's also putting yourself out there, because as we were making arrangements and packing to go, I looked at my husband and I was like, this is ridiculous. What are we doing? I'm going on a freaking game show. Like, I own a business now. Like, there are things that I just had this huge amount of insecurity. For what reason? I don't know. But he is the biggest cheerleader, and he's like, Jules, like, we're doing this. Like, you're going, you can do it. It's going to be great. And so, but I just had this huge thing, like, this is so silly. Like, I should be spending my time on other things. And, but I'm so glad that we went. And I think it just encouraged me to continue to be bold and to continue to go after things. Ever since I bought the business, which was a huge life moment and a huge, like, having to get over this big hurdle, it's just changed my perspective to, it's kind of like the why not. I'm not always I'm gonna fail, and I have, but I will most definitely fail without trying. So we've just tried to practice of, we're going after it, and we say the prices don't quit. My married name's Price, so the prices don't quit, and we've instilled that with Grady. He says that back to us at times when we try to quit. So it's just, I don't know. It's been the most fun part of life. And I'm just like, we're just going to go for it, whatever it is.
That is so cool. Thanks for sharing that, Julie. I'm going to submit application number 7 to Survivor CBS after this now. So it's so challenging though, when you try to apply for those things, you just, there's so many people that apply, and I've applied like 6 times. I went to one in-person audition, and then I went to like a pop-up event they had in Nashville about a month ago. And the event started at noon. We got there like right whenever it was starting, and there were thousands of people in line. And after being in line for about 45 minutes, they came through. They were like, "Hey, if you're not in this spot, like from here on to the
Oh,
back, like you're not going to get to audition in
right.
person." So
That's a
it's one of those,
bummer.
yeah, it's just one of those things you got to keep on doing it when the time's right. The time's right. I know people that have applied for since season one. They've never even got a call back. And there's people that have applied for 10 years and they just now are. So
I
it's
feel
just
like we
about
should crack
timing.
this code.
Yeah, I think we
I
need
feel like you
to.
need to network your way to previous
Mm,
contestants and just get some. We need to make a plan here, okay?
yeah, yeah.
Network our way to the
Well, I'm leaning on you. I might need to hire Julie as my
very
reality
determined.
TV or game show agent.
Yeah, I'm really into
So
it.
yeah, see, it goes back to networking, guys. It's not just business, like Julie
I'm
said.
telling you.
It goes to game show, reality TV, all
Do
that
you want to
stuff.
get things done?
I want
This
to
is
get.
how we got to do it. It's
That's
like,
right. Well,
wouldn't you rather hire someone that you know has said, "Hey, I don't know if they'll be great for your business, but they're a great person. They do this. They have good character." Like that's gonna out of all these resumes, when someone says, "Hey, this person's applying," I'm like, "Oh, well, maybe that resume wouldn't have stood out, but you've given a little."
exactly.
So that's networking,
Yeah,
and it just helps. You're helping the other person too
yeah.
whittle it down.
Well, I think a good way to wrap it up. You've given a ton of insight to your journey, which I appreciate. But if there was one piece of advice, and this is such a cliche and kind of a tough question to answer, but one piece of advice you'd give someone who's starting their professional career, what would you say to them?
So it's kind of two parts. I would say stay curious and be very observant. And so I've always kind of been one, it's probably the discernment part, but I've always just kind of been one to first sit back and watch and just get the feel for what's happening. And in that time, I've observed a lot of things in my career. I've observed things not to do, maybe not how to handle things. I've watched people that I really admire that I thought were at top of their game. And I'm like, how do they handle criticism in a meeting in front of tons of people? How do they introduce themselves to someone they've never met before that they really like value? How just watch how people act, and then take those things, like get clear about where you want to go and just the kind of person you want to be, and just pick and choose, like just tuck those things away in your personal inventory of like, I'm going to pick that up, or I'm not going to do that, or just keep those things going. But I think observing other behavior and just figuring out what's right for you, but staying curious and asking questions is a great way to go.
Love that. Well, Julie, thank you so much for sharing so much about your story. It's a really cool one, and that's the realistic part of growing your professional career is taking action. So thanks so much for sharing that today. And if you're watching, thanks for tuning in the live stream. If you're listening, also thank you for streaming this episode. If you guys want to learn more about Blue Cotton or check them out, just search Blue Cotton on all social platforms. You can Google it. They're a big company. They're a great company. So consider checking them out, and we'll catch you guys next time.